Hey folks, this is Kelani. Patch 8.1.5 is just a few days away, which might make a few of you start asking some questions, like what new transmog gear should I wear to the raid on Tuesday? Alright, I guess that's not really relevant to the patch releasing, but it's definitely an important question to ask yourself. Maybe you're asking things like, will this new Brawlers Guild take me a week or a month to get through? How difficult is it going to be? Or how many alts can I level up in a single day with the new heirloom upgrades working for the 110 to 120 grind? Or maybe you're asking yourself which profession would make the most use out of their new tool of the trade coming in patch 8.1.5. And while I can't give you much fashion advice to wow your guildies on reset day, I can help out with that last one. Call me crazy, but I worked my way through every single tool of the trade questline and figured out what each new item does. If you want a detailed breakdown, I'll leave a video in the comment section below which goes through how to acquire each item, which might be useful for next week, but in this video I just want to focus on whether or not these new items are good and figure out which professions will end up on top after 8.1.5 goes live. So let's jump right in. Alphabetical order has always served me well, so let's start with Alchemy first. Alchemy does fairly well on its own, depending on your server I guess, but most of the time you can make a pretty penny selling your flasks and potions in the prime time of each raid week, usually Tuesday to Thursday, but again that will depend on your server. I know a lot of people complain that the flask or potion prices are below crafting price, but the real trick with Alchemy is buying all of your herbs when they're the cheapest, usually on the weekends, and then hoping for some good procs. Bad procs can cost you gold, but if everyone is already driving down prices, then you either have to hold on until next week or when it goes back up, or try and compete to break even. It can work out quite well, or it can leave you penniless. That depends on your luck and your server, but what does the new tool of the trade have to offer? Alchemists will be crafting Silas's Orb of Transmutation. You can use the orb to transmute it into a different item once per hour, and there's 4 possibilities right now. It can turn into an infinite healing potion, kind of useful but also pretty niche for the most part. Another option is a teleportation orb, which allows you to teleport to any major hub in your current zone. That's fairly handy if you're doing a bunch of world quests or just want to hop around quickly. It can also turn into a disguise toy, which transforms you into random appearances, which I'm sure we won't know the real extent of for a while. And the last thing it can do is provide you with a potion that increases your proc chance of BfA potions and flasks for 10 minutes on a 20-minute cooldown. Most of those are just for show or for a bit of fun, but that last one could seriously crank up your potential profits as an alchemist. It's still quite a good dollop of RNG when you look closely, but at least the tool has some benefit. You can also interact with cauldrons out in the world, which can give you freebies like potions, flasks, and even cauldrons sometimes. I would say alchemy is one of the better professions in patch 8.1.5 because its tool has multiple uses and quite a few benefits which aren't entirely cosmetic, and with a new raid coming, I'm sure the potions and flasks will fly out of your bags for quite a pretty penny. Up next is Blacksmithing, and sadly I don't have too much to say about this one. Right now you can probably make a little bit of gold with the lower end of crafted gear, maybe. The problem with Blacksmithing is that ore typically costs quite a bit more than any other raw material because it's a little harder to obtain and it's used for multiple professions. That makes your initial costs higher, which means you'll have to sell your crafted gear for more to make a profit. That's why plate crafted gear always costs more than cloth, leather or mail, which also means it's usually harder to sell. So not a great start for blacksmithing going into the next patch, and I'll be honest, the tool of the trade doesn't really do anything to help you. The first effect it has gives your crafts a chance to have the indestructible trait, which, while being a nice little roleplay or lore related nod, I'm a super blacksmith now, so my wares don't ever degrade kind of thing, it doesn't really offer much at all. It's not going to increase your profits, it doesn't give you anything unique to craft, and seeing as most people have 1 or 2 crafted pieces at most for their own personal use, it's not really going to save you any gold with repair costs either, seeing as it's just a chance anyway, so you'd have to continually recreate your own crafted gear even if it gets perfect stats, and perfect stats are always going to be more important than indestructible. The other effect was something that excited a lot of people when we first heard about it, being able to repair your own gear. When all is said and done, they kind of made this worthless as well. You can only repair 1 piece of gear every hour, so unless you super micromanage this stuff, you're probably going to end up using a vendor to repair your gear anyway. This one could have been amazing, but it's quite lackluster in my opinion, which leaves blacksmithing in a bit of a bad spot in patch 8.1.5. Moving on, let's have a look at Enchanting, the most profitable profession you can have without putting any effort into leveling it. Just being able to shard your gear instead of vendoring it is pretty awesome and can make you some really easy passive gold. But if you decide to go a few steps further, you can also make quite a lot of gold by selling enchants on, you guessed it, raid nights. People love to quickly enchant their gear either just before raid or right after, meaning you can sell a lot of enchants very quickly if you're on a high population server and you camp the auction house for a few hours. I got to the point in Legion where I didn't actually make the enchants myself, I just bought them for 500 gold to 1k cheaper on the weekend and listed them on raid nights. It was really easy profit, and I guess you wouldn't even need enchanting at that point, but this profession isn't doing too badly now by itself. So does the tool of the trade offer up anything of value? This one is super simple, actually. When you acquire Iwan's Rod of Enchanting, everything you disenchant gives you more materials. I even got a crystal from DEing a blue. That's pretty huge, so yeah, this new item will definitely help in a variety of ways. You would need to DE less items overall to craft enchants for yourself, you would most likely have access to more excess materials you can sell, and if you ever start doing any shuffles which include enchanting, then you're likely to make even more profit. This might be one of the best tools if you're interested in efficiency or profit when it comes to professions. It's just a little sad that the other effect it has is fairly pants right now. You can find inert golems out in the world and you can decide to power them up by using one of veiled crystals. It is consumed in the process, so powering up a golem effectively costs one veiled crystal, but the golem is fairly useless. It's an open world guardian pet, so it will help you fight and whatnot, providing you don't enter any dungeons or instances, but it kinda just tickles stuff. I don't think you really see any difference between having this guardian and not, unless they significantly buff them. So enchanting is still a great profession for a variety of reasons, and the tool of the trade is only going to help you achieve your enchanting goals, whether that be passive income or super secret shuffle grinding. Just don't pay too much attention to the golems. Engineering has always been a bit of a weird one. It's either super cool and quirky with special effects, or it's just kinda kicked to the curb and left with a pair of goggles for the entire expansion. It definitely hasn't been all too exciting so far in Battle for Azeroth, except for maybe like the first week where the fried bombs were doing some crazy damage in dungeons, but that didn't really last all too long. I'm not sure if any current crafts are super profitable anymore for engineers. I know the Goblin Gliders are still doing relatively well, which is kinda funny that one of the most used engineer items isn't from this expansion, or actually the previous expansion. That sort of tells you something, doesn't it? But what about the tool of the trade? Does it add anything meaningful to an engineer's life in patch 8.15? Well, I guess, maybe? Sometimes? It depends on why you're an engineer. Is it going to make some extra gold to help you craft profitable stuff? Not really, but it does give you some extra little pet things that explode. That's what engineering's all about, right? The Uber Spanner allows you to craft 3 different types of Uber constructs. You can craft some bombs which explode on impact, but they're clearly not finished yet, but that might actually be a good thing. That means something here is missing, and it's not just the bombs. It might mean that they're going to see at least some changes between now and patch 8.15, even though that's not really very long, but at least I would hope something changes there. If these bombs get tweaked to actually deal damage instead of just miss every time, then maybe enchanting golems and every other world guardian pet thing that comes from these new tools might be worth using too. Like the next Uber construct. This one is a guardian pet which deals practically no damage right now, so it's going to be useless or it's going to get fixed. One of the two. The last construct is an improved training dummy which taunts everything around you. If you're a DPS class that can only DPS and you're kind of squishy, this one might actually have some use. Pull a bunch of stuff, plop down your AoE taunt machine, and kill everything while you have them distracted. So you might get some use out of this, but it's definitely not worth even thinking about unless you're already an engineer for some other reason. Inscription was another one that was fairly exciting when we first heard about the tools of the trade. Blood contracts could have been so cool, but they're just another world guardian. There's 4 different types which are all fairly useless, so they're either poorly tuned and will get fixed, or these contracts aren't really anything to write home about. The other effect this tool of the trade has is soaking up blood of anything you kill to heal you over time. It's kind of useful, I guess, but nothing to really go crazy about. So the tool of the trade doesn't really offer anything for scribes, but is the profession worth picking up by itself? Probably not. I think the golden days for Inscription are always at the start of an expansion with a new Darkmoon card decks. Seeing as we're past all that hype, all you have left is the contracts and glyphs. Contracts might make you a few gold here and there, and the glyphs can certainly be lucrative if you know what you're doing, but for the most part, I drop Inscription after the first month or two of any given expansion and pick it up again for the next one. With the tool of the trade being quite meh, I wouldn't give Inscription a second glance, really. Jewelcrafting has been one of the moneymakers for pretty much every expansion so far, and as long as we have sockets to slot some gems into, jewelcrafters will continue to make a bit of gold every week. I usually keep at least one jewelcrafter so I can sort out all my gems by myself, but I haven't spent too much time with it in BfA because the gem prices on my server haven't been all too wonderful. Shuffling a bunch of ore for a small margin isn't all too exciting, but being able to make your own gems is always beneficial, so what does the new tool of the trade throw into the mix? This isn't necessarily going to make you any extra gold directly, but it will certainly save you some gold over the course of the expansion. The main effect of this tool is that it allows you to pluck out any of your gems from your gear and reuse them as often as you like. So you won't ever have to buy another Kraken's Eye gem, or any other gem for that matter, as long as you have quite a few ready to go. If you replace your items, you can just pop your gems out and hold on to them until the next socket comes along and pow, slot that gem right in there. No more buying gems or cutting gems as a jewel crafter, at least until next expansion, where they'll probably remove all effects from all of these tools. So that's pretty handy for sure. The other effect this tool has is that it gives you free gems from several gem shrines around Zandalar and Kul Tiras. We got both uncommon and rare gems when we tried this, and seeing as you don't need to cut anything for yourself, that's all pure profit. In fact, anything else you do relating to gems is going to be profit, because all you need for yourself is a handful of your favourite gems, because you can reuse them as often as you like with the Jewel Hammer's focus. This might not be the best tool of them all, but it's definitely not the worst either, and jewel crafting will always be a decent profession in my opinion. Leatherworking is sort of in the same boat as blacksmithing, except the crafted gear is significantly cheaper to make. With leather being more easily obtainable and farmable, which is usually the key thing, leatherworkers can craft their goods for a fraction of the price of ores most of the time, and they can also craft lower items to farm expulsum quite cheaply. Piece those things together and you have a recipe for some half-decent potential gold making. Remember that patch 8.15 brings the new heirloom changes too, so more people might be leveling alts, which means more people buying crafted gear for a quick gearing up boost. Crafted gear straight into Warfronts is usually the quickest way to gear up, so that could be very lucrative after this patch goes live. If you stockpile a bunch of crafted gear, you could make a lot of gold in the next week or two, and there's always the option of shuffling for enchanting materials, so leatherworking does have a few decent options already. Does the tool of the trade bring anything to the table? Well, not really, but sort of. The Mallet of Thunderous Skins allows you to get a decent-ish buff for your adventures out in the world, a 400 primary stat boost, or a stamina and armor boost, or a movement speed boost that doesn't do anything if you run around on a mount. So that buff could be sort of useful, I guess, but it's very easily forgettable as well. The other effect is a personal lust, which is kind of interesting when you dig into it. This is the first time you can actively lust on a single member of your party or raid without triggering it on everyone else. That has some potential in higher end raiding or Mythic Plus. Imagine if that lust triggers Jaina's Ice Block. Instead of tinkering around with your lust timing to really nail a small window, one person can lust to trigger the block, and then your group can lust afterwards. Just an example. The lane part is the 1 hour cooldown, so it might be more useful than some people are giving it credit for, but it is still kind of meh for the most part, so leatherworking won't really change. And last but not least, we have tailoring. Tailoring is again in the same position as leatherworking and blacksmithing, though everything seems to be a bit cheaper again. Cloth always tends to be the cheapest raw material, but that's not really too surprising when you consider everyone can get their hands on it. You don't need a gathering profession like you do with leather or ore. Cloth comes from any humanoid, so everyone can gather it, use it or sell it. That just means higher supply, which means lower price. Crafting gear is usually where the money is for tailoring too, as well as the enchanting shuffles, and you might be able to take advantage of patch 8.15 and new alts, just like you could with leatherworking. So what about the tailoring tool of the trade? This one is a bit quirky. It allows you to find time rifts which you can interact with. Those rifts can give you cloth from any expansion, which is sort of cool, I guess, but it doesn't really do much to increase your potential in Battle for Azeroth if you don't get Battle for Azeroth cloth. So there's a bit of RNG tacked onto this one, but perhaps the most problematic part is that these time rifts don't seem too common. and you have to be active out in the world to come across them. So while you're doing world quests, you might find one or two. If you have herbing or mining and you like to go out farming, you might find a few doing that as well. But you're not going to find any time rifts if all you do is Mythic Plus dungeons and raids. If you're not out in the world exploring, doing other bits and bobs, you won't benefit from this item at all. So this one is going to depend on you a little bit, but getting an extra bit of cloth isn't going to mean too much in the long run when time is money. It's a nice little tool for lore purposes, but it's not all too useful itself. But again, it doesn't really change much for tailors. Sadly, nothing has been given to the gatherers, which is quite a shame. I think all three gathering professions could have been given something quite interesting if the dev team had sat down and really sunk some time and effort into it. It wouldn't have to be a simple yield increase either. They could have tied this into new profession stuff coming in patch 8.2, researching new plants or metals or skinning options, new crafting materials for new recipes with a tool of the trade as a small attunement, or something similar. Though with how most crafting tools ended up, I guess I might be hoping for a little too much here. It is just sad that they were left out. Professions haven't been doing all too well in Battle for Azeroth so far for a variety of reasons too, but I feel like the largest problem is that most of them just aren't that interesting or useful, and there's nothing really exciting with any of them. Some of the tools of the trade help in that regard, while some others just don't add anything meaningful at all. Personally, I think Alchemy, Jewelcrafting and Enchanting are worth the most, and those professions will probably be some of the best to keep as we head into patch 8.15. What do you think will be the best profession in patch 8.15 when you take the tools of the trade into account? Which tools do you think offer the most value or interesting interactions? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.